Okay, welcome to the Lehigh Valley Salesforce Developer Group Summer 16 Release Developer Overview. My name is Peter Knoll, and I'll be presenting along with Carl Brundage. So the agenda for tonight will be going over some Lightning development updates, a little bit of some interesting things that have changed in Apex, some notable changes to sandboxes, and then some community changes, Wave Analytics, and Lightning and App Builder. So one of the big things that came out this release was the Lightning Locker service. So the way that Lightning components work is you can have multiple components on your page. They can be authored by many different people, different companies, come from the App Exchange. And until now, they all had access to the underlying document object model. So one component, in theory, could go in and access the innards of another component, get into the events and stuff like that, and take data away if it really needed, if it really wanted to. So it wasn't specifically secure in that sense. And also, no, that's kind of a nefarious thing, but just accidentally, they could be messing up each other somehow. With this release, everything is contained within its own component completely. They don't have access outside of into like global objects like window or document. Those are, excuse me, those are wrapped by a secure document and a secure window. So only certain functions that that are allowed and won't mess up each other, other components are allowed to be operated. Things like evaling and stuff like that, and accessing the DOM directly and trying to get into other components won't work. And then also there are some, since it's all JavaScript, the Lightning component framework on the front end is all JavaScript. Salesforce or users, developers could go in and kind of reverse engineer and see different methods that Salesforce was using. And then also the documentation that was generated automatically in the orgs under the Aura docs had references to functions that Salesforce didn't really want public. They've cleaned up their documentation, and along with it, they've made it so that it'll be an error if you try to access functions that aren't part of their officially supported API. So, and then they have some other stuff for like kind of safe coding and stuff like that. It doesn't go on automatically. It takes a critical update. So I'll go into an org and show you how it works, and then get into some of the tools that Salesforce has made available to make it easier to deal with the restrictions. First, watch this. Amazing shot. Okay. So here I am in an org, and I don't have the locker service enabled. I have some code in a component. I'm going to drag that component onto a page. So I'm on the account page. Go in here. Bear with me here. So I have a custom component that I wrote. The code for it is available on GitHub. Save this. This is just a simple component that I wrote to deal with uploading files. Saved. I can select the file to upload. And here I get an error that a.run must be a function that's undefined. So I'm getting this error because what has happened is with the locker service enabled, this a.run method, which is the a is the Aura object, is no longer allowed to be used. And it's been replaced by this method called a.getCallback. So the code would have to be updated to use that new method. So if I were to turn off the Lightning critical update, then I should be able to use that. So I can go to setup. Then you can get into the critical updates. Oh, it might have just been. Let me look at the code for a second. Here are the critical updates. It looks like I haven't activated it yet, so something else must be going on. I'm not sure exactly what, but you have 3 different critical updates around Lightning that are important to getting your components to function. One is the Lightning locker security, and then the other one is the access checks. So another thing that Lightning components have is the ability to specify whether certain attributes of the component are public, private, or global. And until now, you could access non-global parts. And if you activate this, then you won't be able to anymore. So let me just go into this second. I'm not sure what happened, but that's the error that that you get when the component is violating the locker service. And the one thing that's maybe a little bit nicer about this is that it gives you the ability to give some feedback to Salesforce. Before this release, it used to just be this gray overlay with an error message that didn't really mean as much. Now, at least you have some way to give some information back, and it gives this stack trace. I'll get into a little bit more of this page too, and how you can explore around in a minute. I want to get back to, so how could you get it so that you're not writing code like that? Because you can save the component with all that code in it and have it in your org and drag it onto the page, and then somebody could take some sort of action later on and this error pops up. Ideally, you'd want to prevent it before you even have the component in your org and on a page. So for that, there's the Salesforce Lightning CLI. It's a Heroku tool belt CLI plugin. So you have to install that first. There are directions in the Salesforce Lightning Developers Guide for how to do that. And
Heroku?
Yeah.
You can also do it to sign up for the Heroku account. I think it's just like a click inside of there.
Yeah, you can do it from
the other night.
You can do it from the web UI as well. Yep. So I'm not sure why it was. Well, anyway, it'll do certain classifications of checks. It looks for what are called intrinsic API usage. So it wants to make sure that all of the JavaScript that you're using is going to be compatible across all the different browsers that it supports. So if you use something that's not part of the standard, like in my file upload component, I used the files array attribute of the in JavaScript, because that's how you get at a file inside of JavaScript, and it's not supported. So that component that I created won't work anymore. And it did. It also provides secure global DOM objects. So that's the wrappers that I was talking about, and it'll check against that, and it'll check against the Aura APIs, and it'll also check other Lightning component JavaScript libraries. It's based on ESLint, which is a really good tool. It runs on your local files, and you can add in custom rules. One of the things that I was looking at too was getting it to be automated, and see how you could make it part of like a continuous integration or something like that. And one of the outputs of the tool is JSON. So you can specify the JSON format. So then you could integrate that into your build. The one thing that I got when I was looking into it and poking around a little bit more is it looked like ESLint has the ability to automatically fix problems, but because this tool kind of wraps ESLint, it doesn't really provide that functionality. So maybe in the future they will. There we go. In honor of the US Open going on right now. So let me bring up the Lightning CLI and give an example. Okay. Okay, so this is the source code of that component. In here, I have local components. There are a couple different components that go into that, but the main one is the file upload component. So to give the command, you run Heroku Lightning lint, and then you pass in the path to the source code. And then it automatically has built into it that it'll only look for JavaScript files. You can specify a different file pattern if you want to only focus on controllers or helpers or something like that. And the other interesting thing is that the source code for the linter is available. You can get it go into the home directory .heroku directory, and it's a node module. You can look in the node modules and see all the source code. So I spent some time looking into that because I was trying to see how I could get it to run with ESLint's automatic fix, but it didn't happen. But it's just interesting. So I run this, and it gives some output. It runs these different rules and that it has built in, and you can look in their documentation, but if you want to know what this is actually using too, you can go into that directory that I mentioned in the node modules and actually see the rules that it's using. So there's a bunch of different things. The brace style, that's a warning. You can get by with warnings. The errors are the ones that are a problem. So this a.run was a problem, and then I should not be using the console statement there. It's not expecting that. So I'll run it again, and this time I'll give it -- quiet. That gets rid of all of the warnings, and then you can just see the errors. So I could go in and fix those errors, and then they would go away. And then the other thing that you can do that's interesting is you can specify your own custom rules file and your own custom rules. So if you have certain coding standards or whatever that your company follows or just your projects follow, you can do that. So I created this this custom file. So they provide an example, and it's also in their Lightning Developer Guide documentation. And here I put in no trailing spaces, 0, so it'll ignore the trailing spaces error. Not that I would necessarily want to do that. But when I first downloaded this, there were a bunch of trailing spaces. So I just did that to see how it would work. And the other thing that's nice about it is you can go into the Salesforce Lightning Developer Guide to look at their documentation, but then you can also go to the ESLint website, because it's basically ESLint behind the scenes. And if you're having any problems, you can look at how ESLint works and see. So one of the other things that I found was you can set it to ignore individual files or ignore individual lines. So let me bring this up here. Nope, it's over here. So right here, it was reporting that this a.util is undefined, is not supported and not allowed. It is in their documentation, and it doesn't cause the component to blow up. So I just stuck in this line right here, ESLint disable next line, and then it doesn't report as an error. Really, they have to fix it on their side, on Salesforce's side, so that it doesn't report as an error. But to get around it, for now, I just put this in, and then it didn't report. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what's reported on the local files. It's just a helpful tool. What matters is whatever Salesforce has implemented on their side that does the actual checking. Hopefully the two stay in sync, but it's possible that they're not.
You try to get it hooked up to your IDE so that it reports the IDE without actually having to run the command. So like,
yeah, I haven't looked at that. That's a good idea. That would be interesting. The other thing you can do is with something like that is if you had Grunt or Gulp or something like that going on, you could have like a watch task, and then anytime there are changes to JavaScript files, it would just run and check.
Has a bunch of pretty good plugins for ESLint.
Okay.
And it basically every time you do anything with the file, it reruns the whole process. It gives you all your warnings and stuff as like these little indicators on each line, and then you can highlight them to figure out what's wrong.
Okay.
Sounds like you found your topic for July.
Yeah, that might be interesting to see how this could fit into it.
That actually played into it. Yeah, that could be interesting.
Even if you don't go that far,
The only problem that I ran into when I was trying to hack around with this is that the errors just get outputted to standard out, and it's not returning like the actual responses exactly from the ESLint API that it invokes internally, because it's wrapped by Salesforce's. So there might be a little extra work to do depending on what you need to do. It runs the verify function. It basically returns it, but if you need anything other than that verify, I shouldn't say it returns it. It writes it to standard out. But if you need anything other than what is called by that verify method, like I wanted to try the fix command, then you're gonna have to write something else to parse the response. But yeah, that would be interesting to see how to do. So one of the other interesting Lightning things that came up was the Salesforce Lightning Inspector. So this thing is pretty cool. I started to get into it and just lost track of time the other night. It's a Chrome extension, so it's only available on Chrome, but it's what most people use anyway to develop. It's got different tabs in it, which I'll bring up and show you, where you can get information about the component tree, transactions, performance details, event log, action, storage. You can instrument stuff. So like if there are different actions coming back from the server, instead of you having to go in and mess around and change your code just for testing purposes, you can actually intercept it as part of the console and change stuff. So now I'll show a demo.
That is awesome.
It is.
It's fun in videos like that where you just like nailing all these wild shots.
Okay. So after you install it in the web store, you'll see this little cloud here, Salesforce Lightning Inspector. Now, what would you expect? You could right-click on it and do something, right? Yep. inspect Lightning component, but you have to have this on first. View developer console. This is the regular console. So now over here you have the Lightning console. And it's getting some information first from the server, I guess. It's building up the component tree. I think the first time that it does it, it takes a little bit longer. Let me see. Again. Okay, there we go. So this is the actual component tree inside of there, all the different components and the actual code for them. So you can see in here, like the order. Some of this is their individual things. Let me bring this.
Does it take that long every time?
No, it was not taking that long at all for me. I don't know. There's some sort of lag. So then when you inspect it, it should select it for you. So it didn't, unfortunately, it doesn't scroll down to it. And because of indentations, it's way over here. So it selected that for me, and not the actual component. So everything is a component from its standpoint. So this is the actual code for the file upload component right here. I don't know why that marker is not going away. So this is what the actual code inside of the developer console looks like. And you can get information about the component. You can see how many times it's rendered. You can get in and look at the attribute value provider for it, which holds the different values of the attributes. You can see what was rendered on here. And the other thing that you can do is if you have it selected, and we'll see if this will work because it wasn't working the other day for me, is you can go back over to the console here, and then you can type in this, Aura temp. Yeah, see, it didn't work. But what that's supposed to do is give you a reference to the component, and then you can get information about it. Like you can get the attributes, just like as if you would have it in your code as a component. And then the only other thing is the component tree will update if you're doing different asynchronous processing and adding to the DOM. But depending on where you are, you might have to refresh to get information over in here, like the rendered count and stuff like that. And the other thing that it has is the performance. So let me reload this page.
So it's just like a 7 o'clock. It's really taking a little bit.
So it is going a lot slower, and I'm not. You can see the page is taking a while to go. I don't know what's going on with that.
It's too bad it's not smarter. You can figure out that you, as the developer, you don't care about all the other components they included.
Well, so that's an interesting point. When I was doing some of my development, I just removed everything else from the page and was looking at this. So I don't know if having this up makes it slower, but I would hope not. I'm not exactly sure what's going on.
It looked like they were showing like everything.
Yeah.
The entire page layout was like components. But there's nothing you can do with it.
So what the performance does, since I can't get into it, but it would show a graph, a stacked bar chart of how long each request made took, and then you can go in and you can look at it on a component by component basis. It'll tell you which components are taking longer, which transactions and actions are taking longer. The transactions are, there's just certain components require transactional integrity in things that they do, and information about that is recorded here. Yeah, this, unfortunately, it's not cooperating. The event log has the ability for you to capture different events. So one of the things that I had was on the change of the file selected, it would fire off an event that it consumed itself. But you can have events that are component events or events that are application events. That's app events and component events. And then there could be unhandled too. So an event's fired and nobody handles it. Possible system event or something like that. And this gets you in to look at all the different things. The actions tab, yeah, the actions tab, this is where, so the events are events that are fired in JavaScript and handled by the components. The actions are communications with the server. So they come from the inside of the code, they come from the same value provider, the controller value provider. So it's basically just JavaScript versus server-side calls. And in here, you can get a gauge on anything that's going back and forth to the server. You can override actions here. So if you run an action, you could have it happen, and then you could drag it over here and override it. And then when it comes back, the next time you could just instrument it to set whatever you want for testing purposes, so you don't have to go in and change code. Then the other thing that's really cool is that I'm not using local storage on here, is the storage inspector. I guess the framework must use some. But inside of here, you would be able to look at whatever was in local storage, and you could make your changes and refresh it and see what has been updated and poke around with it. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly why the problems tonight. It's unfortunate, but they are updating it constantly. So hopefully whatever was going on here will get addressed. Back here. So that was it for the different